I'm Smriti Haricharan. I am a faculty at the National Institute of Advanced Studies, which is located in Bangalore in southern India. I work on the Iron Age early historic in southern India, but specifically Tamil Nadu, both in terms of looking at the landscape, but also specifically at the burial monuments of the Iron Age early historic period. I'm also interested in heritage, dissemination of archaeological methods and concepts, and also in experimental archaeology recently. One of the projects I've been working on is looking at crafts community, specifically related to potters in Tamil Nadu. I've been working with Dr. Uday Kumar, who is a postdoctoral fellow in this project. He has extensive experience with experimental archaeology, and since both of us have a background in experimental archaeology, we're interested in taking forward this project that combines both our archaeological as well as experimental archaeology ideas within it. The National Institute of Advanced Studies is located in the city of Bengaluru, Karnataka state in southern India. We are a multidisciplinary research institute with projects and research interests across the schools of social and natural sciences, humanities and the arts. The Heritage Science and Society program is one of the 11 research programs at the National Institute of Advanced Studies. We have diverse research interests in disciplines such as archaeology, heritage and art historical studies. One of the aspects of archaeology in which we've been increasingly concentrating on through various research projects in the last decade has been experimental archaeology. As a way of giving some insight into the kind of projects we've been recently interested in, I will talk about one of them, which we began working on in the last year. Before the lockdown, due to COVID, we had intended to conduct a workshop on ceramics in archaeology. Unfortunately, the workshop could not be conducted. However, as a part of planning of the workshop, we visited a locality in Bengaluru called Pottery Town. Pottery Town is an area where potters migrated from the neighboring state of Tamil Nadu and have settled down over the past few generations. The way they procure raw materials and produce the pottery has had to adapt quickly to the changes brought about by rapid urbanization of Bengaluru. The extensions being made to the MRT or the metro rail of Bengaluru has been one of the most recent reasons for them worrying about shrinking space and the possibility that they may be asked to move. Our visit to Pottery Town made us think about the production process as well as the kin relations of potters both in Bengaluru and with the neighboring state of Tamil Nadu. However, one of the things we were conscious of was the relationship between academics and participants in studies such as the one we had in mind, which tend to perpetuate existing hierarchies and inherently uneven relationships. So one of the ways we thought we could try to work across these hierarchies was using experimental archaeology as well as through the process of learning and this way build conversations. As a part of thinking through this process, Dr. Uday Kumar and myself decided to learn pottery by meeting once a week and using tutorials which we found online. We began learning the basics of throwing pots on an electric wheel. The clay which we used was brought from a community of potters near Bengaluru and it was already prepared. We were interested in the process of learning. Neither of us had any previous experience in wheel-made pottery, though we had some experience with handmade pottery. Our preparation of the clay before using the wheel, which we had also learned from online resources, was minimal. Through the 6 months of meeting once a week, we maintained a diary to document what we learned from each of these episodes. One of the things that we have been thinking of since then is the process of learning as well as the amount of wastage which we produce by learning only through online resources. Inversely, we then also thought about the questions of labor and material costs that this would mean for a potter who was investing in the process as a source of income. We've been interested since then in exploring the role of apprenticeships play in minimizing such wastage as well as the current practices from which we could understand how potters interact with each other and learn as well in Tamil Nadu. In the last 6 months, we've carried out 2 rounds of firing. In the first one, we used pottery made from the potters of Pottery Town, which we bought from them. However, none of the pottery from that firing survived. We later realized this may have been because of the fact that we did not dry the pottery well before firing. We then conducted another round of firing where we did a pit firing using the pottery that we had made ourselves, and also experimented with reduced firing so that we could make black colored pottery. This was more successful, with maybe around 70% of the pottery surviving, and though we were only partially successful in creating the black colored pottery. One of the other things we experimented with was burnishing techniques. Using a pebble, we tried burnishing at different stages of the drying of the pottery. What we did find was that the moisture of the pottery and the different stages at which it dried did have an impact on the appearance upon burnishing or the effectiveness of the burnishing. One of the dominant pottery types belonging to the early historic period in India, which is dated from 300 BCE to 300 CE specifically for Tamil Nadu, is the black colored pottery. Some of these pottery from the archaeological context are both slipped and burnished, or slipped or burnished. One of the reasons for experimenting with reduced firing and burnishing was to see if we could compare the pottery we had produced with those from an archaeological context. We are interested both in the process of learning, but also in the possible tools and techniques that create the appearance of this pottery. There are sparse studies related to this pottery type, both in terms of the ceramic analysis, but also with respect to any experimental work that has been done on them. Also, simultaneously, we've been visiting potters across northern Tamil Nadu so that we can understand current and contemporary practices prevalent here. We had heard from some of the potters both in Bengaluru and in parts of Tamil Nadu that they still continue to do reduced firing and create these black colored pottery in Tamil Nadu. However, it turns out that it's really hard to locate any potters currently producing such pottery. And one of the reasons they gave us once we did find somebody who knew about it was that this is more expensive in terms of the production cost, as it requires 2 episodes of firing. Our visits with the potters both in Bengaluru and parts of Tamil Nadu also showed us that the circumstances under which they currently produce pottery are quite difficult. They use both hand-turned wheel as well as electric wheel. These electric wheels have been modified by using used or discarded electric appliances, and they fire their pottery using open firing methods. They have no access to electric kilns presently, which means they are unable to work during the monsoon period when there is heavy rain, as well as the fact that the wastage from firing is sometimes numerous in spite of their extensive knowledge and experience with firing and pottery production. Many of them are part of the Potters Union for Tamil Nadu, and they receive some support from the state. But at the same time, the lack of space, even in the non-urban context, has also meant that they're unable to find places both for storage of the clay as well as conduct the firing, but also the fact that the access to clay, which was earlier much closer to their workstations, is now far removed from the places where they work. This project is ongoing and we have a lot more to do, complete and conduct with this. Some of the things which we now plan to do is conduct a few workshops, inviting some of the potters whom we met, in order to engage in a more collaborative process, which will hopefully result in mutually beneficial conversations and possibly policy recommendations that will help with their production processes and their livelihood experiences. One of the reasons we've been able to conduct these experiments has been the fact that NIAS supports multidisciplinary research, and thanks to the availability of space on our campus. Dr. Uday Kumar and I had previously been using green chert to experiment with napping, and we used some of the tools which we produced in butchery as a part of a course we conducted for students at our institute. We've also used remains of previous experiments, such as a furnace, to bury some of the larger bones which we procured from a local butcher. And after 3 months, we conducted the firing of the pottery, which I had earlier mentioned, and we included some of these large bone fragments as a part of in the firing for a short duration of time. So Dr. Uday Kumar has since been experimenting with these samples and has made bone tools with both the unfired and fired bones. We have begun to use experimental archaeology at NIAS. We plan to introduce a course to exclusively talk about experimental archaeology in the upcoming semester at NIAS. there is extensive potential for the use of experimental archaeology in the Indian context. So far, there have been studies that looked at ethnography, but very few that incorporate experimental archaeology in research, in this kind of research. And this is something NIAS hopes to explore.